You don't belong here.
I'm
A woman
sorry.
was told
That
she
gown
didn't
isn't
belong.
available.
She
The gown is
smiled,
beautiful,
bought the dress
and it's my
anyway, and
size.
walked out. What happened next broke every person in that room. If this kind of story moves you, hit subscribe right now. We drop stories like this every week. Stories about real dignity, real love, and the kind of justice that doesn't make noise, it just arrives. The first thing they noticed was the red gown. Not the woman holding it. Not her hands, steady, practiced, hands that had reached inside a human chest at 2 in the morning and pulled a man back from death. Not her eyes, calm, reading the fabric the way she read everything, with quiet precision. Just the dress. A floor-length crimson silk gown with an open back and a price tag that made even the store attendant clear her throat and look away. Dr. Zahara Mitchell stood in the middle of Maison Elite, one of the most expensive boutiques in the Cheongdam district of Seoul, and she was alone with the dress, and she was at peace. She had not wanted to come here. She had not wanted to attend the gala at all. Her director, Dr. Park, had sat across from her 3 days ago and said, with the kind of diplomatic firmness that wasn't actually a request, "You will be there, Dr. Mitchell. The hospital needs a face at this event, and you are that face this year." She had opened her mouth to argue. He had slid the invitation across the desk with 2 fingers, the way people slide documents that are not up for discussion. So now she was here, looking at the red gown, thinking if she was going to be seen, she was going to choose how. She didn't hear the woman approach. "Excuse me." The voice came sharp, the kind of sharp that isn't accidental. Zara turned. The woman was Korean, mid-30s, wearing a tailored ivory blazer with a single diamond brooch at the lapel. Her hair was pulled back so tight it seemed to stretch the skin around her temples. Her eyes moved from the dress in Zara's hand down to Zara's face, and the movement had judgment in it. The kind that had already decided. "That gown," the woman said, "is not for everyone." Zara held still. She had developed this skill over years, the ability to become absolutely still in the center of something ugly, the way surgeons learn to slow their own heart rate when everything around them is in chaos. "It's available for purchase," Zara said. "I'm purchasing it. You should try something more suited to your—" The woman paused. The pause was the insult. "Your occasion." "My occasion," Zara repeated. "You understand what I mean." 2 store attendants stood near the entrance display and pretended to arrange scarves. A couple near the fitting room had gone very quiet. The whole boutique had taken on the particular stillness of people watching something they don't have the courage to stop. "I understand exactly what you mean," Zara said. She looked down at the dress, then back at the woman. "I'm still buying it." The woman's face shifted. Not embarrassment. Something harder. "Do you know what that costs?" "This isn't. I know what it costs." Zara's voice hadn't changed volume, hadn't changed tone. It was still that careful, measured register she used in operating theaters. "I know exactly what it costs. Would you like me to tell you what my last month's salary was? Or would you prefer to just walk away before this becomes worse for you?" The woman's mouth tightened. Her next words came low and fast, the kind that are meant to land before they can be caught. "Women like you don't belong in places like this. You can pretend all you want. Everyone can see what you are." The store went silent the way rooms go silent before lightning. And then a man said, from behind the woman, in a voice that didn't need to raise itself to fill every corner of the room, "I'd like you to repeat that." He was tall. Not aggressively tall, but the kind of tall that a very good tailor knows how to use. His suit was charcoal, his tie a deep navy, his shoes the kind of Italian leather that made no noise on marble floors. He was standing close enough to have heard every word, and his face held the specific controlled fury of a man who has learned to be dangerous without raising his voice. The woman in the ivory blazer turned. Something moved across her face that Zara couldn't quite name, recognition, and something beneath it that looked like fear. "Minjun," the woman started. "Don't," he said. Then he looked at the store manager, who had materialized from somewhere near the back. "I'd like to know if Maison Elite has a policy on how its patrons are treated in your store. Because I'm going to have a very interesting conversation with your regional director tomorrow morning, if the answer is no. The manager looked like a person who had swallowed something poorly. We sincerely apologize for. I'm not the one you owe an apology to. He looked at Zara. Zara looked at him. She felt something she hadn't expected, standing there in the middle of what had just happened. Not gratitude, exactly. More like the strange sensation of being witnessed by someone who actually saw you. It was disorienting. Thank you, she said. But I didn't need rescuing. He paused. Something shifted in his expression, not offense, more like recalibration. I know, he said. I wasn't rescuing you. I was removing a problem from a room. She almost smiled. She turned back to the counter and set the red gown down. I'd like to purchase this, please. Her name was Dr. Zara Mitchell. She was 34 years old, born in Charlotte, North Carolina, to a high school biology teacher and a registered nurse. She had been a quiet child who read medical textbooks the way other children read comic books. She had graduated top of her class from Duke University, earned her MD from Johns Hopkins, completed her residency at Mount Sinai in New York, and then gone further. A fellowship in cardiothoracic surgery in London, a year of advanced training in Zurich, an invitation from Seoul National Hospital that she had accepted on a Tuesday afternoon because the hospital's cardiac unit was doing work that no one else in the world was doing the same way. By the time she was 30, she had performed over 3,000 cardiac surgeries. She had stopped counting after that. It made the number feel like a competition she wasn't interested in. In Seoul, she had done something she hadn't done anywhere else. She had stayed. 2 years now. She had learned Korean, not just conversational Korean, real Korean, the kind that allowed her to hold her patients' hands and tell them in their own language, "You are going to be fine. I will take care of you." Her patients cried when she said that. She didn't entirely understand why, until a nurse explained that it wasn't just the words. It was that she had taken the time. She preferred the operating room to every other room in her life. It was the one place where nothing could be taken away from her based on how she looked. She thought about that, driving home from the boutique, the red gown hanging in the back seat in its garment bag. She thought about the woman in the ivory blazer. She thought about every room she had ever walked into and felt the same thing, that low-grade hum of being assessed before being heard. She had spent her entire adult life walking through that hum. It had made her very, very good at her job. It had also made her very tired. And she thought, for reasons she couldn't entirely explain, about the man in the charcoal suit. His voice, the way he hadn't made a spectacle of the moment, he had just shut it down. And the way he had looked at her when she said she didn't need rescuing, like he already knew that, like he had simply been making a different point. She pushed the thought away. She had a gala to prepare for. Like and subscribe if you want to see where this goes. Trust me, you do. The Seoul Cardiovascular Society's annual fundraiser gala was held at the Grand Hyatt Ballroom, and it was, as these things always are, both beautiful and exhausting. Crystal chandeliers, round tables set with white orchids, a string quartet in the far corner playing something that sounded expensive. Zavra arrived in the red gown at 8:15, accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing server, and immediately found a wall to stand near. She was scanning the room for someone she recognized from her hospital when she heard the heels. She turned. The woman from the boutique, the woman in the ivory blazer, now in a midnight blue evening gown, was standing 15 feet away with her hand on the arm of a silver-haired man in a tuxedo. She was looking at Zara with the expression of someone who has just stepped on something unexpected in the dark. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, the man with the silver hair looked up, traced the woman's stare, and his entire demeanor changed. He crossed the room with his hand extended before he was even close enough to shake it. "Dr. Mitchell," he said, "what an extraordinary honor. I'm Director Choi of Hyun Medical Center. I've followed your work for 3 years. The journal article on hybrid KB protocols, genuinely groundbreaking." Zara shook his hand. She kept her eyes on the woman beside him just long enough to watch the color drain from her face. "Thank you," Zara said. "Are you one of tonight's sponsors?" "One of the hosts," he said. And I hope you'll forgive the directness. I've been hoping for a chance to speak with you. We are building a new cardiothoracic center, and your name has come up in every single planning conversation. I'd like to make you an offer that would be, I think, difficult to ignore." The woman on his arm had gone completely still. Zara recognized the stillness. It was the kind that happens when someone realizes, all at once, the size of the mistake they've made. "I'm happy to talk," Zara said. She smiled. "But not tonight. Tonight I'm going to enjoy myself." She moved on before Director Choi could respond. She found she was smiling properly now. The awards portion of the evening began at 9:30. A podium, a presenter, a short video reel about the state of cardiovascular medicine in South Korea. Zara sat at her assigned table with her hospital's director and two senior attendings and wondered how long she was required to stay. Then the presenter said her name. "This year's Seoul Award for Excellence in Medicine goes to Dr. Zara Mitchell, head of cardiothoracic surgery at Seoul National Hospital, in recognition of her extraordinary contributions to cardiac care, her groundbreaking publication record, and her unparalleled patient outcomes over the past 2 years." The room applauded, not politely, genuinely. Zara sat for 3 full seconds without moving. Her director leaned over and said quietly, "You knew about this," and she said, "I absolutely did not," and he said, "You're terrible at accepting things that are yours," and she stood up. She was crossing the room toward the stage, and she wasn't thinking about the award. She was thinking about her patients. She was thinking about a 62-year-old teacher named Mrs. Yoon who had coded on the table and come back, and who had mailed her a photograph from her granddaughter's birthday party 3 months later with a note that said, in careful English, "Because of you, I was here." She was thinking about all of them. She didn't see the edge of the stage step. Her heel caught it. She pitched forward, and the room seemed to contract in a sharp, collective breath, and a hand caught her elbow. She steadied. She looked up. He was in a different suit tint, black, with a white pocket square. His face up close was calmer than she expected. Not smug, not self-congratulatory, just present. "You again," she said. "You again," he said, and let go of her arm the moment she was stable. She climbed the remaining step and walked to the podium and looked out at the ballroom, and the feeling that passed through her was something she didn't have a name for. Something that had to do with the red gown and the store and the woman's face and the way this man had appeared twice now at the exact wrong and right moment, and the fact that she had 3,000 people's worth of second chances living inside her somewhere, and she was standing in Seoul in a crimson dress, being given an award she had never asked for and hadn't known was coming. She leaned into the microphone. "I'm a surgeon," she said. "I don't make speeches. I make incisions." Laughter moved through the room. She let it settle. "But I'll say this. Every single thing I have ever done in an operating room was for the person on the table. Not for this. Not for any award or any recognition or any applause. For them. They are the ones who gave me something. They trusted me with the most terrifying moment of their lives. I don't take that lightly. I will never take that lightly." She paused. "Thank you." She stepped back from the podium to the loudest applause of the evening. He found her afterward near the terrace doors. "You know, most people use acceptance speeches to thank their parents," he said. "I thank my patients," she said. "That seemed more accurate. You clearly hate this." He nodded at the room, the chandeliers, the polished social choreography of it all. "I clearly hate this," she agreed. "Are you always at events you hate?" "I'm a donor," he said. Occupational hazard. He extended his hand. "My name is—" Her phone vibrated. She looked at it, looked at him. Something crossed her face. "I'm sorry," she said. "I have to go." "Right now?" "Right now." She was already moving. "A patient is crashing." He watched her disappear through the ballroom doors, the red gown moving fast, her shoulders set forward, her entire bearing transformed into something that was no longer a woman at a gala, but something entirely different. He realized he had never told her his name. She had never asked for it. He stood there for a long moment, holding the hand she hadn't shaken. Here's where it gets complicated. Here's where everything changes. Don't go anywhere. A month passed. Zara was reviewing post-op charts in her office on a Tuesday afternoon when her senior nurse, Ji-young, knocked twice and opened the door with the expression she wore when something was unusual. "There's an incoming patient," Ji-young said. "Transfer from Hyun Medical Center. Emergency. They're requesting you specifically. Hyun Medical Center has their own cardiothoracic team." "I know." Ji-young paused. "He refused. He told them he wouldn't allow surgery unless it was you." He mentioned, she looked at her clipboard. Slightly uncertain, the red gown. Zara looked up. "He said he saw you at a gala, that you were wearing red. He said he wouldn't let anyone else touch his heart." Ji-young set the clipboard on the desk. "His name is Kong Jinseo, 37 years old. Motor vehicle accident. Blunt cardiac trauma, probable myocardial contusion, possible aortic injury. He'd stable enough for transport, but how long until he arrives? 20 minutes. Zara was already standing. She had thought about him in the way she thought about most things she was trying not to think about. Briefly, at odd hours, then firmly set aside. She had thought about his voice in the boutique. She had thought about his hand on her elbow. She had thought about the fact that she still didn't know his name. She put on her white coat and walked to the trauma bay. He looked smaller in the hospital bed. That was always true of powerful people in hospital beds. The bed had a way of equalizing. He had a split across his cheekbone and a bruised jaw and an IV in his left arm and monitoring leads across his chest, and he was awake. When she walked through the door, he looked at her and said, "Red gown would have been more impressive. I save the red gown for situations where I'm not about to cut your chest open," she said. She pulled on gloves and reached for his chart. "You had them transfer you across the city." "I did. That was medically inadvisable. I've been known to make inadvisable decisions." He watched her read. "You never came back to the terrace. Someone was dying." "I know," I asked. "They told me you were in surgery for 4 hours." He paused. "I waited." She looked up from the chart. "You waited," she repeated. "I had nowhere to be." The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, given the bruised jaw. "I also realized I never told you my name. I also realized I never asked for it. Does that bother you?" "Not usually," she said. She set the chart down and came to the bedside and began the physical assessment, stethoscope to chest, listening. His heartbeat was there, irregular in the way blunt trauma produced irregularity, the muscle bruised and protesting. She listened for a long moment. "Jun Seo," he said, while she listened. "Kang Jun Seo." She took the stethoscope from her ears. "Dr. Zara Mitchell," she said, "though I assume you already know that." "I looked you up," he admitted, "after the gala. You've published 19 peer-reviewed papers. You've performed more than 4,000 surgeries. You turned down the position at Johns Hopkins 2 years ago to come here. You learned Korean to talk to your patients." He paused. "Why?" "Because they were scared," she said simply. "And scared people need to hear good news in their own language." He was quiet for a moment. "That's the most human thing anyone has said to me in a very long time." She stepped back from the bedside and picked up the chart again. "I'm going to need an emergency CT angiogram, and then I'm going to need to take you to the OR. Your aorta may be dissecting, and if it is, we do not have the luxury of time." He nodded. He was watching her face. "I'm going to be fine," he said. Not a question, a statement. "Yes," she said. She met his eyes. "I'm going to make sure of it." The CT confirmed what she feared. A type A aortic dissection beginning just above the aortic valve. Without surgery, it was a death sentence. With surgery in the right hands, survival rates were in the 70s. Her hands were the right hands. She knew this the way she knew her own heartbeat. She scrubbed in at 6:14 in the evening. She stood at the table and looked at the spread of instruments and felt the particular quiet that descended on her in this room, the world going small and specific, narrowed to the space between her hands and the thing they were meant to do. "Music?" the scrub tech asked. "Not today," she said. She operated in silence. 3 hours and 41 minutes, every movement deliberate, every decision made from a place of perfect stillness. When she closed, she stepped back from the table and looked at the monitors and said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "Good," and pulled off her gloves. In the waiting room, Two men in expensive suits had been sitting for 3 hours and 41 minutes without speaking. When she pushed through the doors, they both stood up simultaneously. "He's stable," she said. "The dissection has been repaired. Barring complications, he will make a full recovery. He'll be in ICU overnight, and if everything looks right in the morning, he moves to a regular room." One of the men pressed his hand over his mouth. The other one said, in a voice that had clearly been holding itself together for hours, "Thank you, doctor." She nodded. She walked back through the doors. She went to the locker room and sat on the bench for exactly 4 minutes without moving. Then she washed her face, changed her coat, and went to check on her next patient. He was moved to a private room on the 5th floor the following morning. She came at 7, as she came for all her post-op patients, doing rounds before the rest of the floor had woken up properly. She expected to find him asleep. He was sitting up, reading something on his phone, looking irritatingly good for a man who had been in a major cardiovascular surgery 14 hours earlier. "You should be sleeping," she said. "I slept 6 hours. That's more than you slept." He set the phone down. "Ji-young told me you were here until 11 doing charts. Ji-young talks too much. Ji-young is delightful." He looked at her. In the morning light, without the bruising inflating the drama of the injury, she could see his face more clearly. There was something in it she recognized, though she couldn't immediately name it, a kind of bone-deep tiredness that had nothing to do with the accident. "Sit down. I'm making rounds. You saved my life 14 hours ago. Sit down for 90 seconds. She sat down. They looked at each other. "The woman from the store," she said. "Heyman. My ex-girlfriend," he said. "It wasn't an apology, just a fact." "I know." She introduced herself at the gala. She was with Director Choi. Something moved through his expression. "He's her current boyfriend. He offered me a job, I heard." A pause. "Did you take it?" "No, why not?" She thought about it. "Because I built something at Seoul National. My patients are there. My team is there." She looked at her hands, the familiar sight of them in her lap, ungloved, off-duty. And because decisions made to prove a point to someone else are always wrong. He looked at her for a long moment. "You know, when I walked into that store and heard what she was saying to you," he stopped. "You were angry," she said. "I was angry," he confirmed, "but not just at her." He turned toward the window. The morning light was coming through the blinds in thin lines. "I've spent my whole career in rooms full of people who judge everything by how it looks on the surface. What label, what name, what family. I've done very well inside those rooms. I've also always known exactly what they're worth." He looked back at her. "You stood there in that store and you didn't flinch, not once, and you bought the dress." "I really wanted the dress," she said. He laughed. It cost him something. His hand went briefly to his chest, but he laughed. Over the next week she came every morning. She told herself it was standard post-operative care. It was standard post-operative care. It was also the best hour of her day, and she didn't examine that too carefully. They talked about everything. She told him about Charlotte, about her mother teaching biology with the enthusiasm of someone who had just discovered that cells were miraculous, about the moment at 15, when she had understood that the heart was both a mechanical pump and the thing that killed people from grief. He told her about building his company from one investment at 23 into something that now operated in 11 countries, about the years of 16-hour days, about the specific loneliness of arriving at the top and finding it quieter than expected. On the second morning, she came in to find him attempting to answer emails with his left hand because his right shoulder was still stiff from the surgery. "What are you doing?" she said. "Running a company," he said without looking up. "You are 3 days post-op from open chest surgery. The quarterly report doesn't care about my sternum." She crossed the room and took the phone out of his hand with the same clean certainty she used to remove instruments from a sterile field. He stared at her. She set the phone face down on the table beside the bed. 3 days, she said. For 3 days, nothing that you are is about what you do. Just rest. He looked at the phone. He looked at her. "You're the most authoritative person I have ever met." "Thank you." It wasn't entirely a compliment. "I know," she said. Rest anyway, he rested. She did not entirely understand the warm feeling this produced in her and chose not to investigate it. On the third morning, she told him about the patient she had lost in her second year. A 51-year-old man, father of 4, everything about the surgery had gone correctly and he had died anyway. The way patients sometimes did, not because of error, but because of the body's own silent decisions. She had driven home at 4 in the morning and sat in her car in the parking structure and not cried, but simply been unable to move for 40 minutes. "What got you moving again?" he asked. "I thought about the next one," she said. The next patient. Whoever they were, wherever they were, living their life without knowing that I was going to be the person in the room. When things went wrong, I thought, that person needs me to get out of the car. She looked at her hands. So I got out of the car. He was quiet for a moment. "You carry everyone. It's the job." "No," he said, "it's you. The job is what you do. Carrying everyone is what you are." She had no answer for that. She was not used to being seen that precisely. "The accident," she said, on the 4th morning. "What happened?" "I was distracted," he said. "By what?" A pause. "I was thinking about a woman I'd met at a gala, wondering how to find her again." She looked at him. "That's not funny," she said. "It's not a joke," he said quietly. The room was very still. Outside in the corridor, she could hear the low hum of the hospital going about its business. The distant intercom, the wheels of a medication cart, someone laughing softly at the nurse's station, the ordinary sounds of a place where extraordinary things happened every hour. She stood up. "You need your wound check. Zara." It was the first time he had used her first name without the title. It landed differently than she expected. Not inappropriately, just differently. Like hearing a piece of music she had known for years played in a new key and realizing that was the key it had always been meant for. "The wound check," she said, and reached for his chart, and was careful, for the rest of that hour, not to look at his face. She was discharged from her own feelings 7 days later when Juncio was discharged from the hospital. He had sent flowers to the nursing station, a gesture so extravagant that Ji-young had photographed them and sent the picture to her personal phone with no caption, just 3 orchid emojis. He had left a handwritten note for the night team that made 2 of the nurses cry. And at the door, with his coat on and his associates waiting at a respectful distance down the corridor, he had stopped beside her and said, low enough that no one else could hear it, "Have dinner with me." "That would be crossing a professional line," she said. "You are no longer my treating physician. I was discharged 4 minutes ago. The post-op follow-up is in 2 weeks. I'll see someone else for the follow-up." She looked at him. He looked at her. Down the hallway, one of his associates was staring very carefully at the ceiling. "One dinner," she said. "One dinner," he agreed. He took her to a restaurant in Itaewon that looked, from the outside, like a building that had given up. Inside, it was 12 tables, no menu, a chef who came out and asked what you had eaten recently that you wanted to feel again. She said her mother's cornbread from Charlotte, North Carolina, from a cast-iron pan. He said the doenjang jigai his grandmother had made before she died. Neither of those things appeared on the table. What appeared was something that contained the feeling of both of them. They ate slowly. They talked about medicine and money, and the ways both fields were the same. Both involved people, with too much power making decisions about people, with too little of it. They talked about Seoul and what it felt like to live somewhere you hadn't been born to, the particular freedom of being unknown, the particular loneliness of the same thing. She told him about the early months, the way the city had felt like a code she hadn't learned yet, and then the morning she had woken up and understood a joke someone was making on the subway and laughed before she realized she was laughing. "That's the moment," he said, "when you laugh without thinking." "That's the moment," she agreed. She asked him what he missed about the years before the success, the genuine years, the ones before the company had a name, an evaluation, and a publicist. He was quiet for a moment, which she was learning was his way of taking questions seriously. "Certainty," he said finally, "not certainty that things would work out. The other kind. The certainty of knowing exactly who I was, because I had nothing to be except myself. He turned his glass slowly. When you have nothing, you have perfect clarity. When you have everything, he stopped. Everything becomes a mirror, she said. He looked at her. Yes, exactly that. I know that feeling, she said, from a different direction. When you become someone people write papers about, people stop asking you what you think. They ask you what you know, and knowing is easy. Thinking is where it gets interesting. You think in the OR, he said. I think everywhere, she said. The OR is just where it matters most. The restaurant emptied around them. The chef came out and poured 2 small glasses of something amber and left the bottle. Outside, Seoul was doing what Seoul does at midnight, gleaming, restless, in love with its own reflection in the Han River. He said, I need to tell you something. She looked up. I've been in a lot of rooms, he said. Boardrooms and galleries and fundraisers and restaurants where the tablecloths cost more than most people's rent. I have sat across from brilliant people and powerful people and beautiful people. He turned his glass in his hand. I have never in my life sat across from someone who made me want to be quieter, more honest. Less, he gestured vaguely at himself, at the suit, at the careful surface of things. Less all of this. Her hands were still in her lap. Jun Seo, you walked into a store where someone was trying to make you feel small, he said, and you made yourself bigger, not louder, not angrier, just bigger. And then you walked away and bought the dress and went home, and I spent the next 3 weeks thinking about the fact that I didn't know your name. You nearly died, she said quietly. I know, and you requested me specifically. I know, he said again. Terrifying precedent, completely inadvisable. A pause. I would do it again. She looked at him for a long moment. Something in her chest was doing the thing she had spent 34 years being extremely careful about, opening. She was not generally a person who opened. She had learned, the way people from her particular history learn, that open things get filled with the wrong material if you're not paying close attention. But she was paying close attention. She had been paying attention to this man since he walked into a boutique and said, I'd like you to repeat that. She thought about all the things she had built by herself, the degrees and the fellowships and the surgeries and the papers and the years in Seoul and the Korean and the late nights in the operating room and the early mornings reviewing charts, and all of it, every single piece of it, assembled by her own hands, her own mind, her own stubborn refusal to be anything less than exactly what she was. She had not built any of it for someone else. She had built it because it was hers to build, because the work mattered, because patients needed her to be the very best version of herself that she could be. She had not been waiting. She had not been lonely, not in the way that diminished her. She had been whole, and now she was sitting across from a man who had seen her whole and wanted to stay in the room. I tried very hard, she said, not to feel what I'm feeling. Did it work? A long pause. No, she said, it didn't. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. Outside, Seoul glittered on. If you're still here, I need you to subscribe. Because what happens next is the part nobody sees coming. Not even her. 4 weeks later, on a Sunday morning, she was in her apartment in Gangnam, sitting on the kitchen counter eating toast while he made coffee and argued with her about the correct way to brew it, which she insisted he was doing wrong, and he insisted she was confusing with something else entirely. You are describing a French press, he said. I am describing good coffee, she said. Those are the same thing. They are categorically. He set down the coffee, crossed the kitchen, took her face in both hands, and kissed her with a thoroughness that ended the argument. When she leaned back, she said, That is not a valid counter-argument. I thought it was quite good, he said. The morning light came through the tall windows and made the apartment look like something from a magazine, and she thought, This is the life I am living. This is real. This is the Sunday morning of a woman who bought a red dress in a store where someone told her she didn't belong. He poured the coffee. He brought it to her. He stood in front of her, and his expression had changed. The lightness was still there, But underneath it was something more serious, more intentional. She recognized the face. She saw it in herself, sometimes, before a difficult procedure, the face of someone about to do something that matters. "I want to ask you something," he said. "Okay," she said. He reached into the pocket of his shirt. He had been wearing the shirt since yesterday. Soft gray cotton, slightly rumpled, the kind of shirt that existed only in private mornings. He pulled out a ring, not a production, not a box, not a table set with flowers, not a speech prepared in 3 drafts, just the ring. A simple platinum band with a single stone hung that caught the light with the quiet confidence of something that doesn't need to perform. "I know this is too fast," he said. "I know it by every conventional measure. I don't care about conventional measures." He looked at her. "I nearly died 3 times before I met you. Twice in business and once in your operating room, and I have been paying very close attention to the fact that my life started happening after I walked into a store in Cheongdam and heard someone trying to make a woman feel small." He paused. "You are the best thing I have ever had the sense to pay attention to. Marry me, Zara." She had not cried in a professional setting since her 2nd year of residency. She did not, strictly speaking, cry now. What happened was that her eyes became very bright, and her hands became very still, and she looked at the ring, and then at his face, and then she said, "You know I'm going to keep my name." "Obviously," he said, "and I'm keeping my position at Seoul National, I assumed. And I am going to continue to be unavailable at dinner when someone is dying. I have already made peace with this." "Then yes," she said, "yes." 3 weeks later they walked into Maison Elite together. She had not planned it as a statement. She had simply needed a wedding dress, and she had been in the boutique before, and the gowns there were extraordinary, and perhaps, she admitted to herself, in the car on the way over, perhaps there was a small and thoroughly human part of her that wanted to walk back in. The boutique was the same. The marble floors, the soft lighting, the white orchids in the tall vases by the entrance. The same store manager came forward, and his recognition of her was instant and visible. His eyes moved to her, then to Junso, and his entire professional bearing rearranged itself into something much more careful. "Dr. Mitchell," he said, "welcome back." She smiled. "Thank you. We're looking for wedding dresses." She didn't see Heyman until she was already halfway through the bridal section, and she would have been able to just keep walking. She had nothing to say, nothing to prove. The moment had passed the way moments did. Except that Heyman saw her, and Heyman's face did something complicated and involuntary, the kind of thing that happens when the story you've been telling yourself stops matching the story the world is telling. Zara looked at her for a moment, just a moment. She thought about the red gown. She thought about the woman's voice. "Women like you don't belong in places like this." She thought about all the rooms where that voice had spoken. Not just this woman's voice, but all the voices that sounded like hers in every boutique and boardroom and hallway she had ever walked through. She thought about how much energy she had spent, across a lifetime, managing the weight of those voices. And she thought, "I am standing in this store with the man I'm going to marry, buying a dress for that wedding, and nothing this woman said in this room or in any room will ever be able to change that. It will never have been able to change that. It never had any power. It only ever had the power she gave it." She turned to Junso. "The ivory one," she said, nodding toward a gown on the far rack. "Let me try the ivory one." "Not the red," he said. "I already have the red," she said. He smiled. She smiled. They moved through the boutique like people who belonged everywhere. Later, she would think about the whole arc of it, the store, the gala, the hospital room, the kitchen on Sunday morning. She would think about how the worst moment had contained inside it all the best moments, folded in so tightly you couldn't have seen them from the outside. Someone had tried to tell her she didn't belong. She had stood there in her calm, in her red dress, in her 4,000 surgeries, and her Korean learned for scared patients, and her years of becoming more precisely herself in every room that tried to diminish her, and she had simply not believed them. That was all. That was the whole thing. She had simply not believed them, and the rest had followed. If this story reached you somewhere real, if it felt like something you needed, then share it with someone. Leave a comment telling me the moment in your own life when you refused to believe someone who said you didn't belong. Those stories matter. Your story matters. Subscribe. We'll be here every week. The stories are worth staying for.